For years now, I have warned anyone listening that if there's one thing you should have a plan for, it should be a lights out situation. It seems the United States has gone along all this time not caring much about its infrastructure. I find it very curious that all of a sudden Donald Trump has just signed into motion an executive order on the national resilience to an electromagnetic pulse, or an EMP. For years we've talked about they're doing nothing, the infrastructure is depleted, it's just falling apart. If we get hit with one, this country is going to be crippled. It would take months, if not years, to get the components brought into this country to fix it. Now, he lays this thing out where he goes through each sector. And I also want folks to know that they talk about some tests. What are those tests going to be? Because during these tests, they have to report back to the president within certain time frames the results of those tests and also the critical infrastructure in this country. And he goes on, and it would take me probably 15 minutes to get to this whole thing, so I'm just going to skim through it. And he touches on the Secretary of Defense, what the Secretary of Interior should do, the Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of Energy, the Secretary of Homeland Security. They go through every single one of them's responsibilities and the coordination. The Director of National Intelligence, all of them are mentioned in this, unlike a lot of the other executive orders that I've read off before. Then he goes through a list of time frames, 90 days, in which Homeland Security has that time frame to respond for different things here. 180 days for the identification described in subsection A2, and that's for the Department of Homeland Security. Within 180 days, they have to identify gaps in existing test data, and that's the Department of Homeland Security. Within 1 year of the order, the Secretary of Energy has to report back to him. Within 4 years of the date of this order, the Secretary of Interior shall complete a magnetotelluric survey of the contiguous United States to help with the critical infrastructure and to know who the owners and operators are of all these different places, even in private sector, and to try to safeguard against EMP vulnerability. They go into extreme detail. I want to remind everybody out there that I went up to Fond du Lac this past year to try to take part in an EMP type of drill. It was advertised as being for the public, so the public could prepare. When I drove up there and I got there, I find out otherwise. I find out that they were doing it behind closed doors. They didn't want the public to even really know what was going on whatsoever. They ran me out of there, and when I got home, I had agents coming to my door. All the things I've done, all the places I've been, all the protests I've chased, all the everything that I've done out there, I come home from that, and I have agents at my door? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you right now, there's something in the works for this country in terms of the lights going out. I've said it for years. If this executive order don't wake you up, I don't know what will. So, the writing's on the wall. I can sit here and say it till I'm blue in the face, but if people do not heed the signs and do not get a plan together, it's your own loss.
Is a variable. Therefore, it's not every of those spots that will have an effect of volcanic activity. But you have a grid basically looks like this, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, not perfectly drawn, but it's a grid.
Det är Sunil Cabral. and this is one of my great-great-grandchildren. But this is a corner where I have my altar. I can't even begin to tell you the things that go on here, where this little corner has come and gone, what these things mean. But to the person who creates this, and the stories behind it, should tell you something. I'm the elder of the Barbosa tribe, and no one can tell you the stories that I can. But everybody's alive, and it's time to tell your stories. Make them true. Get a record, because you're not going to be able to take these things with you if you have to go. And from what I understand, as the storm's approaching right now, the skies are black as it's New Bedford, it's 1:36. Check the weather. And there's so many more. This is real moringa, grown indoors. All this information, everything about this is online. We're able to put this stuff in the ether. In the cloud or in the, well, let's put it this way, out there, you know where our Creator says it comes from. This is the Mad Sherman, Part 1.
he could spin yarns to all of you about our days in the past, if you will, which were, might have even been, conflicting, if you will, But as time goes by, everything falls called maturity. And when you mature, you understand how to do things and how to handle things, and you have the wisdom, which is why we should always have those older around us so we can learn from them. As our President General said today, we need to learn from those that have gone ahead of us, if you will. Musa, which is the best way to introduce him, as I will, if you okay, right, is part of the Party Ways project. Yeah. And Jack and I met him the first day that we were involved with Linda, and we were as confused as they were. But it turned into a beautiful relationship. And here's Musa side. Here's Party Ways.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word became God. All right, my name is Wayne Barbosa, and this is just a few minute clip, just to give you an idea of what KateRadio.net is all about. It's the first of many series that will be going on for the next 40 years, starting with teaching people how to use the channel of symbolism, because that's what word is. The word will take you from a picture to an understanding. If I say cat, you will see a cat. And if I say cat, calico, you see calico. If I say Siamese, you see Siamese. If I say dog, you see another picture. So words say pictures, pictures say words. In my speech given back in 2003, I think it was, the ambassador from Cape Verde, the Republic of Cabo Verde, where I'm from, I'm Cape Verde. These are little islands off the coast of West Africa. This is where the slave trade began. Many Portuguese and Cape Verdean cultures think that the Cape Verdean baskets that were produced during this slave trade were just a mixture of Portuguese and Africans. But the truth is, they were selective with their women, and the women were selective with which children would become slaves and which one would be staying home to be taught whatever the father's skill was or whatever the mother's skill was. The mother had skills that go way back into motherland, Cape Verde, or motherland Africa, because that's the breast of Africa. These islands are actually the tips of mountains that once rose very high, and people that lived there, of course, but during a cataclysm, it sunk, and all the landmass sunk. And the people that survived were called Hiscots, which is sea people. And these are descendants that eventually became the Phoenicians, the Moors, that really settled Cabo Verde hundreds of years before the Portuguese and the Spanish got there. Now, the Spanish and the Portuguese settled in Cape Verde around that time of the beginning of slavery. They had a settlement that even Henry the Navigator tried to conquer and overthrow about 4 or 5 times, and he attacked it because it was a strategic point close to America, and everybody wanted to come to America because there was gold, elements, and these elements gave them power. Now today we fight against principalities and powers, and the most important part is that somewhere along the line we forgot about the Creator, the planet, and the things that are important, the natural things, and we've come to the point where we worship the dollar. We don't even have the gold and the silver that goes behind it. In fact, the federal government isn't even a government bank. It's a private bank. And we need to know a little bit more about money. We need to know a little bit about words. We need to understand that we're slaves. If we don't know, then we're ignorant. And ignorant is an opportunity for anybody to be enslaved by another people. Now, I've come to an understanding after 61 years And after 13 children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, that I'll never stop being a soldier and warring against this hypocrisy that we now live in, because I know what it is to be free. Unlike most people, Cape Verdeans, even though they have the color of brown skin, white skin, and black skin, they have all the colors, they kept their culture and history alive. They were never enslaved. They were actually children. They came over from these little tiny islands, but they kept their culture. And as you notice through the flag, they have the same flag as the Ethiopian. Now, Ethiopian is the oldest civilization in the world. And that's where we'll have to go.
Hello, I am going live because American friend requested me to make a video in English so that everybody can understand. So, to explain this really simple, there is a heat loss inside the engine at all times, and it is a result of a falling electromagnetic field. So by taking out the heat loss from the engine, instead of the heat loss just going internally and making a heat band inside the engine, you can take out the heat loss, or varmetapet. Take out the heat loss, you put it in this box where you have a lot of switches. And this box is very simple. Inside this box is lots of condensators, capacitors, and a lot of wires. It's a mess inside there, but it works. So again, I'm online because a friend in the States, United States of America, have requested me to make this video in English, as he doesn't understand Norwegian. So I'm just making a short video in English just to explain a little bit. And when it comes to three-phase engines, all of them, when connected to the house on three-phase house outlet, they use, example, this engine from 1952 will use not less than 600 watts, and that engine there, it's a 5.5 horsepower engine, will consume almost 800 watts. I had it to run on three-phase. If I don't remember incorrect, it was 798 watts on three-phase outlet from Norwegian in Norway many years ago. This engine here is ABB engine. What is it there? It's 2.5 kilowatt. So that there will use easily more than 750 watts from if you connect it to the three-phase house outlet. And this engine here is 0.5 horsepower engine, will consume a little bit less than those bigger engines, and but on this system you actually I have this ring trafo here, okay, and this ring trafo transform down to if the input is 230 volts, the output will be 110 volts. So what I do here, I actually reduce the volt input, and I also here there is 380 volts configuration, and there is 220 volt configuration. So in E mode you get which it is now, okay, you can see there those three on top there is connected together, which is visible here with those. So these three is connected together, so it is adjusted for 380 volts, and that's very important. So because the engine becomes more efficient when you run it in E mode, okay? So the point is that you have to have as little volt in as possible, and the engine has to be configured for the highest possible voltage. And okay, you know, a volt times amp is watts, okay? So by reducing the volt input, I can reduce how many watts this engine will use, okay? You turn on this engine now. Now it runs at 174 volts or so. Amp is 0.6, and the watt is 3 watts. So this engine now runs on as little as 3 watts. And the reason for that is that the heat loss that is inside the engine has the ability to come out on the cable that goes into that box there. That is this speaker cable. And this speaker cable is connected here and there. Okay? So you have one leg on the 3-phase. You have 3 outputs, okay? Or inputs, shall I say, instead. Where these 2 cables here goes in here and in there, where I then emulate the last phase on the engine here between these 2 available legs. It doesn't really matter if I emulate that one and that one, or that one and that one, doesn't really matter. In this case it is between this one and this one. What happens is that the back EMF inside the engine has the ability to escape the engine before the back EMF or the heat loss make a break on the engine. Because, easily explain it, let's say on this is just a generator, but if the drive pulse starts here, there's 50 drive pulses per second here in Sweden at least. States have 60 Hz. So if you move the disc from here to there, that's one drive impulse. And from there to there is the next one. But before the next one, it has to rotate to there. And from there to there, you have a falling electromagnetic field that will actually try to move the engine the other way. And the reason for that is that the sine wave goes like this, okay? And this is 0 here, this line here is 0. You have the sine wave like this. When the sine wave is on top, then the drive pulse is down. But you have something that happens from here and down to the 0, okay? And from top to 0, you have a falling electromagnetic field. What happens to that field? Yes, well, any electromagnetic field in movement will create an electric current, which again will create an electromagnetic field. So the falling electromagnetic field from top, when the drive pulse is down, and to zero again will create a brake force. That brake force is the back EMF or the heat loss. Normal science will say that you cannot take out the heat loss from an engine. And of course, normal science doesn't understand that you can, because they just call it heat loss or varmetap in Norwegian language. And because of, they just state it is a loss, of course. And of course it is a loss. But the point being is that loss is approx 40 to 50%, depending on the engine. What type of engine it is, what kind of configuration you have connected it, and so forth. So it can be up to 50%, and if you have magnetic engines, permanent magnetic engines being consumed. So this is pretty amazing stuff. And if I now try to connect this to this engine, so I will do so just very fast. I just done some very quick connections here just to have it easy. So this video is this live stream, I should say, is on request, as I said, from an American friend who is approximately 80 years old and have been in the political business. So he has some funding he wants to start for this, to get some of this made, complete finished systems for run in homes in the States. I'm not sure if that's a good idea, but that's what he wants. So we will, if it's safe or not, I don't really know. But let's see here if I have get any connection here. Well, there is a connection. So right away when I switched on the start cap, then the engine started. So I will just demonstrate that again. If the start cap, the start switches is off, then what will happen is that the engine will just make a little bit sound and then nothing more. Then I turn on the start switches, or the start cap. It's not start switches. You see, and you can hear the engine now is not in harmony with itself whatsoever. It uses way too much energy. The back EMF that is going into the engine is not in harmony with the sine wave whatsoever. If I turn off now and adjust a little bit here, and see it runs on 15 watts, and that 15-16 watts, and maybe, just maybe, I can adjust a little bit here on the capistans to see if I can get down the consumption even more. 14 watts, 13 watts, let me see, 13, 14, maybe that's what I can get it down to. It wants to go down to 12 watts sometimes, so maybe I have a bad capacitor in this box, I do not know for sure. Let's see if it will go up to 14 again. Yes, yeah. But okay, that is very, very good. That's extreme good. I'm trying to fine tune. Between every capistans value I put in, I have to wait a little bit because things doesn't happen right away. $12, $13. It was stable for a long time on 13. Then I touched a switch, and then it was down to 12 a little bit. You see, so So it is somewhere between 12 to 13 watts, and that's not a big engine, but it's not too small either. And running on 13, 12, or there was 11. So also when I have to take in account that on this engine I have not removed the grease from the bearings, so it doesn't run very good. If I turn off this, it will come to a stop very fast. I'm not touching the engine, so it stops really fast. And when you see it stops, it is almost right away, a little bit before it is reaching the end, so almost right away. On this engine, I take away the grease inside the engine. I just put very thin oil in, and if I do a little bit on this, it will spin a lot. So of course a little bit kinetic energy because of this disc. It's quite heavy, but still. So if I take away the grease in the engine, I probably will come down to even lesser. And I also removed the fan inside here, because you don't need a fan whatsoever. The fan is just bullshit. Doesn't need fan anymore, because you have to remember, since I take out the heat loss, or the back EMF as I like to call it. EMF stands for electromagnetic field, and B stands for back electromagnetic field, or it hits back. So I don't have any fan inside here whatsoever. I removed the fan, and here it is. And I can have this engine on like, I don't know, a day or 2 or 3. I never tested how long or whatever. I probably will never experience this engine to get hot anymore, because the back EMF goes into the box. What makes heat is no longer there, so I don't need a fan. And of course that saves friction, air friction. So there is no fan whatsoever. Nothing. There it is. There's no fan. And of course it's hard for you to experience this without me having this on for many hours, but if I did have it on for many hours, it will not become hot. It starts very slow now if I don't touch the start capacitor. If I move up the start capacitor a little bit, so it will never become hot, ever. 14 watts. So the good tips is take out the grease inside the bearing, clean the bearing very well, and with compressed air or anything that can remove the grease, and put 1 drop of very thin oil in each bearing. Never more than one drop, never. And then this engine will run below 10 watts. Most likely below 10 watts. I had this engine, this old air engine, to run at 8 watts, 8.88 watts. So it can really go, big engines can really go very low. Even if I had a 75 horsepower engine here, I will probably end up at maximum 40 to 45 watts or so. And under maximum load, let's just take that engine as an example. If I connect that engine there to the net power in the house, to the 3-phase net power in the house, because, of course, I already have a connection for that in the house. I can do it. It's just that I don't have the cable for doing it. In Sweden they have some funny plugs for that, which I don't have. But I could easily demonstrate this engine and just use some wood to break the shaft. I could easily break this engine on the three-phase network, and having all that back EMF going on inside the engine, could easily break it so it will consume 2 kilowatts easily. But when you have this configuration here, it takes out the back EMF, putting into the box, and at the exact timing when this is correctly adjusted, it will go back into the engine. I will have a very, very, very hard time to break this engine with wood or whatever to even touch 1 kilowatt. It will be very, very hard. Very, very hard. Even it's a relatively small engine. I will need to have, disc brakes from a bicycle will burn up before I was able to break it. It would be too small. And still, even if I used a car brake system on this and brake it maximum, I will have still a hard problem getting over 1 kilowatt on consumption when under full load. Very, very hard. I already tried it. It is damn bone hard to break an engine under rotor version control. To break it to use that much, it's extremely hard. So you save a lot of power, and what's so damn cool is that the more you break this engine now, the more back EMF or heat loss is generated. Because when you put the engine under load, the Zener wave becomes higher. When the Zener wave becomes higher, it also means that you have a longer distance falling magnetic field. And that is very good, because the higher the Zener wave is, there is some kind of bearing problem there. So the higher the back EMF or the Zener wave is, the more back EMF will be put into the box. That again will turn the engine and also will reduce the input power from the net. So the more you put load on this, the more back EMF power you will have. So that is very funny, because if you have this connected to the three-phase net, then the more load you put on the engine, the more back EMF will break the engine. So you need a lot of power to always overcome the back EMF or the heat loss. So the more you break an engine that is connected to the host net on the three-phase, the more resistance the heat loss will create. And that is totally bullshit. It's waste of energy. And totally opposite is a fact when you have a rotor-verted engine. The more load you put onto the engine, the more power goes into the cup box. Of course, when the cup box is correctly tuned to the actual load, then that's a fact. If not, then that's not a fact. But as long this is resonated or adjusted correctly, when you have 1 kilowatt load there, the back EMF that goes into here is so damn big that load 500 watt on this generator, as this as generator, then the input needed is 10 times less to run it, depending on the efficiency, the COF factor of the engine. This engine, I believe, is 87% effective, not more. That's maximum. So if you use Baldur Super S series that you can find on eBay or Walmart or any place, they are usually more than 90% efficient, and those engines will produce a COF of up to 198%, believe it or not. We did a test in 2006, me and free energy researcher from California in the States. We had an output of nearly 6 kilowatt with an input of 635 watts. And if you don't believe me, well, just look at the video on my wall on Facebook and you will see it. It's there. Even though that video was never made for proving anything, it was just a video log of what me and a fellow free energy researcher friend did together remotely, because I lived in Norway, he lived in the States, so I never met the man at all, but we did a remote work together and brainstormed a lot, and it gave result. And we also built a CLS direct rotoverter system. CLS stands for closed loop system, so that we, if this is the generator and this is the engine, we actually put the power directly from the generator, if this is the generator, by a special box, if you like, with the diodes, relays and capacitors, and put the generator power directly, almost directly, just by a box, directly into the engine, and the system run by itself. And it was tested in Simi Valley in 3 different houses in Simi Valley for 6 months. And the system ran by itself and gave power to the house, totally off the grid for 6 months. And he had the minus what that CLS direct rotoverter system did take in loss, or what the loss was on that. He had approx 4.5 kilowatt energy in average for free to run the house. And the system was without any batteries, and the engines was put together not by drive belts, just direct on the shaft. And those engines was 7.5 horsepower Baldor engines of the long one, Super S series. We also had a little bit larger engine that was 10 kilowatt, or no, sorry, 10 HP, and we was able to get out a lot more than just that. We was at almost 10 kilowatt, very close to 10 kilowatt. It was just 10 or 20 watts that was missing, and the input was 998 watts on almost 10 kilowatt out, and that was a little bit larger engines, of course, than 7.5. But those engines that we did that test on, they was too big to handle, so we didn't put that out in any house. We used 7.5 kilowatt engines. So they was running 6 months in Simi Valley in 3 different houses, and at the contract time with me and Shad, the contract was totally unfair. So the total of our income will be, or royalty will, on the contract will be only 5%, which me and Shad didn't agree to. So the whole project did go to hell, and the investor did take all those 3 units and run away with it, and Shad was almost killed. He ended up in hospital and was there for 6 months, and he barely made it. He was so near dying, but it's luck that he's alive today. And after he came out from the hospital, someone had rigged an explosion in his lab, so I think it was 2 or 3 weeks after he came home from hospital, the lab exploded and he almost died again. So now he doesn't, I talked to him like 4 or 5 months ago, and he doesn't want to come to Sweden right away or anywhere, and he doesn't want to do any free energy research in the States, but as soon he are ready to come to Europe or Scandinavia or wherever, we will start real work and recreate what we already has been successful. So, well, I am recording this video for our friend in the States. He asked me to make it for me to talk English because most of the other videos is in Norwegian. So, and he wants to start some funding for this.